Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I could figure out how to start this now. Anyway, thanks for having me here. Like I said, I want to get one point out of the way first. I'm going to talk about a bunch of old video games. I don't think that necessarily means I'm old. I'm going to say I'm retro, right? So, anyway, the first question you may be asking is, who is this guy? What's he all about? Well, that's a good question. My name's Larry, former LucasArts artist, game designer, writer, worked on Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, a couple of Monkey Island games, and a few other projects. I think I wanted to be a grunge rocker back in the 90s. It didn't work out. I don't have the hair for it anymore. So good thing video games was a better career for me. The next likely question is probably, how did I end up there at LucasArts? And I think the answer, I got very lucky. There's a lot of luck involved. I started out as a cartoonist. When I was in school, I would always do silly pictures on my homework. I ended up being a political cartoonist in my school newspaper, and ended up graduating with a fine art degree, which basically meant I was a starving artist. Hard to find work with that kind of degree, but I did a bunch of cartoons, and as you can see here, a bunch of crazy comic t-shirts. Surfwear was really big in the 80s, so I had a company where I was doing couch surfing in activewear, which was kind of a joke on let's say I'm less athletic than some people. But anyway, one of the things that led me to LucasArts was I was part of a illustrators group, and I went to an art show, and I met a guy there named Martin Cameron, and we were looking at the different art, and then talking to him, and found out he worked at LucasArts, or it was Lucasfilm Games at the time still. And my roommate and I, who were both artists, were really excited. And we're like, oh my gosh, you work for George Lucas doing art. That's amazing. How do I get a job like that? And he was kind of like, well, it's not really art. It's colored bricks. It's AGA kind of thing. It's not art like what we're doing in the art show here. And so he was kind of embarrassed by it. They were like, what are you talking about? A paid job doing art for George Lucas? That sounds great to me. And then that was kind of the end of that conversation. I think a couple of years went by after that I hadn't talked to him. And then one day the phone rings, and I answer it, and it's Martin. And he goes, hey, is Anson there, who's my roommate at the time? And I go, no, he's not here. Can I take a message? And he said, yeah, this is Martin calling. I wanted to see if he's interested in coming out to Skywalker Ranch to interview for a job at LucasArts, Lucasfilm Games. And my eyes bugged out, of course, because I'm thinking, that's the job that we were all dreaming of. Do I say something? How many people does he need to hire? And I just kind of was quiet for a long time, and then I just finally thought, I cannot hang up this phone and not ask about it. It may not be appropriate, but I had to do it anyway. I'm like, Martin, this is Larry, by the way. How many people do you need to hire? And he goes, oh, Larry, I forgot you guys were roommates. He goes, yeah, you should come out too. Both of you guys should interview. So at that point, it's like, come out to Skywalker Ranch was basically his thing. And that was Lucasfilm headquarters at the time. And I will say it's not your average office building. It's an amazing estate in the hills in California. It's almost like a place that Disney would have built as a themed location. There's an entire backstory around it, as if some ship captain built the place in the 1800s. But it's actually full of offices. There's sound studios, movie theaters, the whole thing. And went out and had the interview there. Talked to the art director at the time, and he basically said, oh, I want to see your work. And of course, that's back in the day when we have paper portfolios. So we're lugging around this giant packet of art, and he opens it up and he takes a look, He looks at like the first picture, and then he just starts flipping through it really quick. And my jaw dropped because I'm thinking, oh, he doesn't like my art. I failed in the interview. And then he looks up and he saw the expression on my face, and he basically said, oh, no, this stuff is great. Found out later that the reason he was doing that was a lot of the previous artists that they had hired were very successful painters and comic book artists at the time, but he really struggled to get a lot of their friends to want to come work there because it was doing art with colored bricks. And it's like, that's not real painting. I don't know if I want to do that. So they decided, well, maybe let's get some younger people that we can train to do this kind of thing. So he goes, you guys are great. Come back and do an art test. And but he said, first, let me show you a demo of some of the stuff that we're working on here. And again, at the time, I'm thinking, I'm just excited to be here. I don't care what they're working on. If I'm working for George Lucas, that sounds good to me. And but just to give you an idea, on the left is what the most recent computer game I had seen was when I went to the interview. So I'm thinking, is that what I'll be doing? I don't know. And he goes, let me show you our latest game. And he pulled up Secret of Monkey Island. And I go, oh, okay, that's what I want to do. And so we're really excited. Both my roommate and I got hired, thank God. I didn't really do the math on that before I invited myself along. And I, of course, after the fact was thinking, uh-oh, if I got hired and my roommate didn't, I would feel terrible. We both got hired, came in to do an art test. First time I had ever used a mouse. And I'm actually drawing with the mouse, and my arm is moving out, and I didn't realize I could pick it up and reset it. So for a while, I'm like, what do I do? And then finally I thought, I gotta go ask for help. And then I picked it up and was going to get help, and then I realized, oh, I fixed it, okay. So that was my first experience doing computer art, and needless to say, there was a bit of a learning curve, but they were happy with our work, hired us to come back and start on the job. And the first thing the art director said is, okay, there's two projects that we're staffing up for. One of them is a science fiction game based on a concept by Steven Spielberg called The Dig. And the second concept is a sequel to Monkey Island. And he goes, I can't guarantee what project you'll get on, but let me know which one you prefer, and we'll see what we can do. And so then he asked me, and I thought, Monkey Island, that is perfect. This is the kind of thing that I've been training for my whole life. That's the one I want to work on.
Oh, of course.
So of course I was put on the Dig.
Oh, the Dig.
This was an early version of the Dig, so not the one that was released. Noah Falstein was the designer. It had a little bit more RPG elements to it. But the thing that was amazing, working with the art team there was a bunch of very accomplished artists. There's a guy named Ken Macklin that did a bunch of the concept art, color paintings of what the alien world was going to look like, what the architecture was like. And then I basically got to do these images of setting the specific room locations. So he sort of created what the look of the world was, and then I made the specific locations that were needed for the game. And this was all pre-3D, so literally that image in the center there, we had a view of it from the other side, and we got a bunch of tissue boxes and paper towel rolls as placeholders to try to figure out if this building is here, what does it look like from this other side? But anyway, it was an amazing project, very talented people, and the one thing that was frustrating to me was the characters for that early version of the Dig were very small. We rotoscoped people, and it didn't have a lot of character expression. So that's the thing I was missing. That's what I was excited about with Monkey Island. And thankfully, the Dig ended up getting shelved. And as you guys may know, it went on to get rebooted later. But at this point, that original version got shelved. And they needed help on Monkey Island. So Ron Gilbert basically said, well, I'll take some of your artists because we're behind schedule, but I want to give them an art test just to make sure they know what they're doing. which we didn't really, but we were the only ones available at the time. So the first project I got was Walt the dog, which is the dog in the jail that has the keys, like Pirates of the Caribbean. And he said, why don't you do an animation of the dog? And he's got to walk in with the keys and drop the keys and that kind of thing. And so I didn't know what I was doing, but they had a great reference library. They had a bunch of animation books from Disney, and they had the Edward Maybridge photos, I think, late 1800s. He took sequential photos of animals walking and running and that kind of thing. And I think there was a dog in there or something. I'm like, perfect, that's the reference I need to tell me how dogs' legs move. And so that was the first bit of animation that I did, pixel animation. I designed the character with the horn in the ear. And that was the first video game character that I got to design. So I was having fun. And basically I was learning to animate on the job. So it was interesting because I thought I might want to go to grad school and learn something more about traditional animation or maybe graphic design in order to get a real job. And this ended up being like, hey, we're going to pay you to figure this out. Because the great thing was basically the technology curve of games at that time. It was so limited what you could do that it didn't take me very long to get up to speed with the state of the art. And then as I started to learn how to animate more and more, then the programmers would say, oh, well, maybe we can find a way to make that work. So it was kind of the perfect timing. You can't learn on the job like that anymore, but it was a great time. And hanging out with a lot of artists there, I was learning a lot from them, so I had mentors on the job. That was fantastic. I'll apologize for the monkey wrench puzzle. I didn't design it, I did animate it. I know it doesn't translate out of English at all, and people suffered, so sorry about that. But the fun part was just doing a bunch of animation. I did a bunch of the finale stuff with Bloodshot, and as I started learning the process, the way the games were made back then, typically the animator would just create a couple of general functions, walking, reaching, climbing, that kind of thing. And then the programmers, who were also the writers at the time, would take that and choreograph it, putting it together sort of like a little puppet show. And then they would write the comedy around it, that kind of thing. But we started trying to do more elaborate animations that were specific to the scenes that were happening. And so I'd get a list of animations from Ron Gilbert, and he was a little bit busy, so I'm like trying to understand, well, what's happening in this scene? So I ended up, I had worked with Dave Grossman on the original Dig project. So I went, and he shared an office with Tim Schafer. So I went and met Tim, and I was talking to the two of them, and I basically said, okay, what do you need this animation for? Because Ron asked me to do something that's going to take like 2 days to do. And they go, oh, well, this is what happens, and the puzzle is this. And I go, so it just needs to end with the character in this location? And they go, yeah. And I go, well, I can do this idea in half as much time, and it'll be funnier. And they go, yeah, do that. Okay, that sounds good to me. Well, don't worry, we'll talk Ron into it. So that's how my process of working on the animation for games evolved. I just ended up brainstorming with those guys, and a lot of it was an opportunity to do, technically, to be writing. It was visual gag writing, basically, because like I said, nothing was scripted yet. The story ideas and the puzzles were there, but none of the jokes were written yet. So I'm like, well, there should be some visual jokes happening. So I got to do a bunch of that. But as I started doing animation, I started doing a lot of slapstick stuff. I had some crazy things. Guybrush steps on a rake in one of the scenes, and I first did the animation where his teeth fall out. And I started doing a bunch of stuff like that, and Ron was like, no, that's too much. So I was dialing it back, but I kept showing it to Tim and Dave. Like, we need to do a game that is more of this kind of thing. And they go, yeah, let's do that next. So I'm all excited. And then I found out next was, oh, wait a minute. They have to go off and write and design it. And I'm a production artist, which means I'm working on something else. So I'm like, okay. So I ended up working on a Star Wars Nintendo game. did a bunch of tiles for the Death Star and the surface of the Millennium Falcon. Worked on that for a little bit. And then finally we got a chance to do Day of the Tentacle. And the whole idea from the beginning was basically it's like an interactive Looney Tunes cartoon. And Peter Chan, who did the background art on a bunch of those LucasArts games, he and I worked together, came up with the look of it. I did some initial sketches for Bernard, the first character that we started with, and did a pixel version, the turnaround that you can see up there, and did the goofy walk animation for Bernard. And Tim and Dave came and saw it, and they're like, that's it, let's do that. I will say it was one of the fastest projects I worked on in terms of designing the visuals. Part of it was because I had spent most of Monkey Island 2 working on a look like that I thought we got to do something like this. And partly this is just sort of my animation or my character's style that I already drew anyway. So foreshadowing some of the later projects, and I struggle with the process a bit more. But this one, I always say to people, this was the most fun project I worked on because it was a small team. We didn't work crazy long hours. Everybody was very collaborative, and the style just kind of fell into place really easily. So they were happy with that. That was the direction we set. The other thing I originated the role of lead animator because we realized previous games, the more artists that we brought on, the more the art style started to kind of stray from some of the initial things. You'd get different characters designed by different artists, and they'd start to look a little bit different. So I was in charge of making sure that the look was consistent on this. And but we had some amazing talent too. Like, for example, if you guys remember the opening credits animation, that was done by our intern, who ended up, his name's Kyle Balda, he ended up going off to be a animated film director, and he directed the most recent Minions movie. So that was the kind of people that the company attracted. And I would say now that I'm still learning how to work when your team isn't 100% the best people on the planet. It's like, okay. But anyway, we finished the game, and we were really happy with it. We thought, man, this feels like a Looney Tunes cartoon. Wouldn't it be great to get endorsed by Chuck Jones? And so we talked to marketing and said, is that possible? And they're like, well, let's call his people and see. Turned out he was coming to San Francisco to give a talk or something, and they're like, we'll set up a meeting with you guys. And so we're all excited. Meet your hero, Chuck Jones, the great director. And so we met in a hotel room, demoed the game for him. He was very complimentary, and we're all excited. And then he looks at us at the end and he goes, so why are you showing this to me? And we're like looking to the marketing person like, didn't you guys have a conversation about this already? And so we were kind of awkwardly sneaking out going, can you fix this? What's going on? A couple days later, then we talked to the marketing person, and she goes, I'm sorry. I don't know if there's a miscommunication or what happened, but he's not going to endorse the game, unfortunately. And of course, now I think about it, the perfect quote for the box cover would have been exactly what he said. Why am I looking at this? Chuck Jones. So maybe we'll do a special edition update that has that. But anyway, I was excited for the next thing. Everybody was like, all right, what are you guys going to do next? And Rebel Assault was put in front of me. Because again, I'm a production artist. I'm not the guy that gets to decide what you do next. And but it was a fun project. It was definitely innovative. It was the first live action, limited live action, but it had photoreal characters as the pilots. But a lot of the work was basically video cleanup of the compression problems. So I wanted to be doing more cartoons, and thankfully, Steve Purcell took pity on me. So he's the creator of Sam & Max, which was based on a comic book originally. And they had already had a game that was up and running. They were in production. And I was basically talking to Tim Schafer, and he's like, my new idea is taking a little bit longer than expected. So I'm waiting on him. I was going to be on his next project. And Steve said, why don't you come on over, do some stuff on Sam and Max? And he goes, how about the Cone of Tragedy animation, which is one of these crazy amusement park rides? And I go, great, is that something in the comic? What is the Cone of Tragedy? And he goes, I don't know, figure it out. And so at that point, I'm like, oh, my job is to make Steve laugh. All right, this will be fun. And if you guys are familiar with the scene, I don't know if in Brazil you have this. We went to the shopping mall at lunchtime a lot of the times there, and they have this knife shop. I don't know if that's a thing here. You can buy like kitchen knives and hunting knives and whatever, and they sell Swiss Army knives also. And they would always have a big Swiss Army knife in the window with blades that would animate. And I'm like, oh, that's a thing that looks dangerous. So basically, I made the amusement park ride so they get strapped in, and then all these blades come out. And Steve laughed, and I'm like, all right, fun job. And then he said, how about doing some of the supporting characters? So a bunch of different characters that Sam and Max would run into. I did the Gator golf guy on the top there. It's a mini golf place that's in the Everglades surrounded by alligators. So he's got bandaged hands when he tries to hand you the golf clubs. And half his teeth are missing. Anyway, finally trying to check, is Tim ready? Are you ready yet? No,
I think
still not ready. But Zombies Ate My Neighbors was a fun game. Mike Ebert was designing it, and they were working on it in the same building I was in. And Mike basically came up to me and he's like, I hear you're still waiting for Tim. I was like, yeah. And he goes, well, we've got the final level of the game that's the credits level. And it's basically a replica of our office building, and it's going to have all the people that worked on it that you can come up and talk to. And we're struggling to figure out how to do little pixelated caricatures of everybody. So he's like, do you want to take a stab at it? I'm like, okay. And I think I must have spent a good part of the day trying to figure out that puzzle, because it was a puzzle. How do you make a tiny pixelated head that looks like all these different people? And then I finally got to a point where I realized with that few pixels, there's only like 3 different chins that anybody can have, 4 different noses, you can change hair color, but it's pretty limited. And then I started figuring out, here's all the pieces. And then it's more like a Mr. Potato Head thing, like where you just stick the nose or the chin on, like, oh. And so you can see this is Steve Purcell up there, actually. It's like Steve has glasses. He has a tall forehead that's 1 pixel taller than anybody else, receding hairline, and that's it. So it was fun to work on. And then finally Tim was ready. Technically ready enough to bring me in. And me bugging him a lot may have helped me get pulled into the design process. So the fun thing was he had the story concept put together and had maybe half the puzzles, and he basically said, okay, why don't you help me finish it? And I think because previous games he had also worked on with Dave Grossman and Ron Gilbert, and so he's used to having more help. So he's like, yeah, I admit this is taking a while. Why don't you help me with that? So we spent a couple of weeks in a conference room, and we're designing the rest of it. The scene where you jump the big canyon, I helped work on the design for that, worked on the finale, and that was basically my training on how to design adventure games the LucasArts way. So it was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And the whole project, it's like we wanted to do something very different from Day of the Tentacle. So it's like the art style needs to be something different. It was still a comedy, but we wanted to make it kind of weird, it's more serious. We were thinking more it's like a graphic adventure or a graphic novel kind of thing, like a comic book type of approach. And I think at the time I was looking at Ian Flux, the video from MTV, if you guys remember that. I was trying to do something a little more extreme, and I was struggling with it. And then we ended up looking at the Hellboy comics from Mike Mignola, and Peter Chan did the background images in sort of a style like that. I realized, okay, that makes sense. Let me go a little simpler with the characters, because I realized our team was still pretty small. If I tried to do Ian Flux the game, it never would have worked. So I figured it out. This first black and white sketch is I think when Ben came together. It's like, okay, give him a big cartoony jaw. Everybody in the world has squinty eyes like Clint Eastwood because they're tough, and that's the flavor of the game. And started working on it, started clicking at that point. The other thing that was exciting was all the previous games had the interface taking up like the lower quarter of the screen. It was a lot of real estate. And it's like, now we have the technology to be able to run the whole game full screen. We're like, okay, we can do a pop-up interface, but we realized, well, we don't want it to look like an interface. We want it to feel like part of the world. So I ended up designing this to look like a tattoo. And of course, we had to put it on one of the gang characters. And then we had close-ups of all the characters for talks, so we were trying to make it very cinematic. The process for the first time, we realized we're going to have these more cinematic scenes, so we're going to do some storyboards, and we're going to put together animatics and be able to play rough versions of the different scenes. We'd wire it up into the game to make sure it was working, and then we'd send it into production. And then the finale is a good indicator of kind of the crazy chaotic action feel that we wanted. It was still an adventure game with puzzles, but this was like, yeah, you're solving a puzzle at 100 miles an hour running down the freeway. So, and of course it was like, how do we make this more extreme each step of the way? You're riding your motorcycle, you get hit by a truck, the next vehicle comes, it just gets crazier and crazier. And Tim had the idea of one of the gangs had their hideout at an old airplane graveyard where there was an abandoned plane. And that's a really cool place for them to hide out. And then as we started figuring out the finale, it's like, it feels like it needs one step more to make it really exciting. I'm like, okay, wait a minute. The airplane can't fly, but what if it could drive? So they basically take their hideout on the road and they slam into the truck and it gets chaotic. That last scene, everything's hanging over the edge of the canyon. It was a challenging project, though. We were trying to do a lot of new innovative things. We didn't have a big enough team. So the last 6 months of the project kind of burned everybody out. But thankfully, LucasArts gave us a nice wrap party. You can see the team up there on the left is it's like 15 of us making the game. But we had a big wrap party. They rented a San Francisco bar. They brought in the Gone Jackals to play live. They were the band that did the soundtrack. And it was a lot of fun. The other picture there is a group of us that got together to do the special edition voiceover a couple of years back. So anyway, finished this project, and finally I'm like, what's next? Am I gonna have to wait again? And then I was given an opportunity to actually design a game. Like, yes, I don't have to go work on some other sci-fi game. I wanna make a cartoon. I get my chance now. They brought in Jonathan Ackley and said, we're gonna team you guys up and we want you to make a Monkey Island sequel. This was not like something I pitched. I never would have thought of that because I'm thinking, well, this is Ron's game or Dave's game at least. And then they said, well, Ron left the company a couple of years ago. I'm like, oh, yeah, right, okay. Dave had followed a few years later and was working with Ron on Columbus. And then Tim had just pitched Grim Fandango. So it's like, yeah, Tim agreed to take a look and make sure you guys don't mess it up or anything, but you're on your own. Everybody trusts you. Go ahead and do it. So we were excited about it, started developing some early concepts, and I can go into more detail in the Q&A later probably. Let's just say a bunch of our ideas were a little bit off the deep end crazy. And then as we started looking at those concepts and realizing that we also had to start our game where Monkey Island 2 left off with a kid in the theme park, and we started getting the impression, you know what? All this stuff that we have is not piratey enough. We're trying to sell people a pirate game, and there's too much not pirate stuff in it. So then we kind of went back to the drawing board and actually literally went to a drawing board and started making a list of cool piratey things that you see in your favorite pirate movies, and then tried to figure out what would be the comedic Monkey Island version of that we could do. So we kind of went back to our roots. What are the fun pirate adventure things that we could do? And that's when we finally came up with the idea of the cursed ring. And we realized, okay, Guybrush is the idiot, so he's going to give the woman that he wants to marry this ring, and she's cursed, but now he's on an adventure to figure out how to lift the curse. And he goes to do a bunch of pirate adventures to solve that problem. The story's actually pretty simple, but it gives us a lot of room to kind of play around with funny supporting characters, weird side quests, just comedic scenarios, and that worked pretty well for us. We spent a month or two doing the basic design and story after that point. And then for the first time, I got to experience the other side of the coin of artists waiting for me, where they were constantly knocking on the door. Because the smart thing we did this time around was we hired a bunch of extra animators. We actually got a very talented team of people from Sheridan College in Toronto that were all trained to be feature film animators. And we're really excited, but they're all looking around like, are you done yet? And of course, I made the job harder than it needed to be doing character design in this project as well. But I pride myself on trying to come up with a new look for characters on all my projects. And also the challenge with Monkey Island was there were a few different styles. If you look at the box cover painting, it kind of has one look, and that may be a little similar to the close-ups in the first Monkey Island game. But then Ian McKay did a more painterly version of those that looked a little different, and then the pixelated versions kind of have their own feeling. So stylistically, it was kind of moving around, and we knew for Cursed Monkey Island, we were going to have higher resolution for the first time. So it's like, we can come up with a style and it'll be consistent across everything. So at that point, I started trying to come up with something. I felt like I wanted the characters to look a little more cartoony, like some of the previous box covers I think look more realistic. And I wanted it so that when you look at the characters, you know this is going to be a comedy. And so we played around with that. I ended up doing the Barbary Coast Pirates first and felt like that's where it kind of clicked for me. But I still struggled with Guybrush and LeChuck. I had some, 50 sketches that were all wrong, but they kind of were moving in the right direction. So then finally, I ended up going to the animation team, and I realized a bunch of them were good character designers. So I started delegating that, and they helped me and really saved my butt, and also got them working on animation quickly, so we weren't paying them to wait. But anyway, and meanwhile, Bill Tiller was working on some of the background art, and he started with a more cartoony version. And we thought, well, that was fun, but it didn't feel immersive enough, didn't feel epic enough. And we started looking at some fantasy artists. He was a big fan of the brothers Hildebrand and loved their color work. And then we were also looking at Howard Pyle, who did a bunch of famous art, pirate paintings, I think in the 20s or 30s. So it's like giving a more painterly look. We realized that's what we wanted for the locations. This image of the cabin up on the cliff then was the first time that Bill did a version where we felt like that's really the style that we want. And once that was put together, it just clicked. We started building a rough version of the game. We always would do that once the design was done. Had very rough art, stick figures, or sometimes we would use characters from previous games. And just start wiring it up to make sure the puzzles work, to make sure it makes sense how the story flows. It's a very rough version, none of the writing's in there, but you want to make sure that all the pieces kind of go together in a rough state before you start adding the detail. So these black and white versions are pencil sketches that I did to kind of try to communicate to Bill roughly what I was thinking of the locations when we worked on the design. These all then have the color versions that Bill did, and I think for future talks, I'm going to show one that he changed significantly because these ones are pretty close. But depending on how things evolved, as he would go into painting, he would come to me and go, well, I think it would work better from this angle, or I've got an idea for something funny with this. So it was kind of an evolution with that. But the fun thing about showing the black and white images here too is this is the origin of Murray. Murray was a happy accident. He was not in the original story or the design, anything. It was basically, I drew this sketch and I put a skull in there because the previous scene you blow up the skeleton pirates on the boat. And so, of course, he would float in. And once I had him in there, Jonathan started programming the scene and realized, well, that's another character for us to talk to, and it's kind of a limited environment, so of course you want to talk to the guy. He's undead, he's fine, you can still talk to him. And so that's kind of where that character came from. First version that Jonathan did, Murray was just a meme, and it's like, oh, I don't like that character. And he goes, what do you think? And we started brainstorming. It's like, well, he's a bad guy, so he's supposed to be mean, but you don't want to hate him. And then we started figuring out, well, what if he's mean, but it's ridiculously mean? And then we realized he doesn't have any arms and legs, so all of his threats are essentially, here are the terrible things I'm going to do. And then Guybrush says, how are you going to do that with, no arms and legs and that kind of thing. And once Chuck Jordan and Chris Purvis, who are the other programmer writers on the project, saw Murray, they're like, oh, I got an idea. And they didn't tell us or ask permission. They just went off, and every room that they were working on basically already had bones and skulls in it because it's a pirate game, of course. So they're like, let's put Murray over here. And so they're all having a blast writing for Murray. And at that point, it would literally be like a week later, and Jonathan and I would play the latest build. Oh, let's make sure everything's, oh, Murray's in this scene. And so, again, it's back to like me trying to make Steve Purcell laugh in the Sam and Max animation. Chris and Chuck were trying to make us laugh with Murray, and that's where the character came from. Thankfully, like I said, we had a bigger team. It was a big production. Most of my day would start with me giving an animated scene to one of the animators, moving on to the next guy, going and making the rounds. And as I got back to the first person, it was time to check their progress. But thankfully, we didn't have a death march at the end. The project came together pretty well. We were on schedule. We got near the end, and it became clear that the finale that we had planned was going to make us go over budget. We didn't want to ask for more time and money, so we thought, let's cut it back. We can simplify the finale. The one regret I have with the project is that I think I cut it back a little bit too far. It's a bit abrupt, but I think cutting it made sense. Just I wouldn't have cut it as much. But we were able to get it done on time and on schedule. Everybody was happy with how it turned out, and we won a couple of awards. The one that I'm most proud of is SIFA, is the International Animation Society, and we were nominated for that. It's mostly film and TV, but they had a games category that they had added a couple of years earlier. And so I got to actually fly out to Los Angeles and put on a tuxedo, and it was actually televised. So I'm there in the audience, I'm looking at my notes because I'm terrified I'm going to forget to thank someone on the team. I get up there, I do my speech, I thank everybody, I'm like, ooh, sit back down in the audience, I think, okay, I didn't mess it up. Then I listen to the next couple of awards, and I realize I forgot to thank the Animation Society that gave me the award. So that I don't make the same mistake. I know you're not giving me an award today, but you invited me. Thank you very much to Canal 3. It's great to be here. This is a joke, it's not part 2. This is just a quick epilogue to say, in case anybody's wondering what
Tem a parte 2, que é o que ele fez depois. Ele foi trabalhar na Walt Disney.
Work for Disney. The last 20 years, I've been working in the theme park space with Imagineering. The way I got in there was basically doing an interactive game that you play in the theme park. And I've been doing a lot of variations of that kind of thing. including the Millennium Falcon, projects like that. I can't escape Star Wars no matter what I do. It's not a terrible curse to bear. Anyway, I ended up leaving the company in 2020. They had a lot of layoffs in the pandemic. Since then, I've been consulting as a theme park designer, a video game consultant, that kind of thing. And the last point I want to make is Jonathan Ackley and I may or may not be working on a new video game right now. The main part is if we can get funding. So we've been out pitching. We've got a concept. It's a narrative adventure comedy. It's got a lot of similar framework to the old classic, but it has an updated modern interface that works on lots of different platforms, real-time 3D. So it's kind of hopefully the best of the old and the best of the new combined. We've got a team, we've got a design put together, and we're looking for funding. So we'll share more as soon as we can. We're excited about it. If anybody has any ideas for sources for funding, I'm all ears. And we can open it up to questions if I haven't gone horribly long. But thank you very much.
Tem que ser em inglês. Vai lá, vai já arriscar.
As perguntas vocês podem fazer em português que a gente traduz para aí. Quem quiser fazer em inglês, faz, a gente traduz a pergunta em português.
Eu vou em português.
Beleza.
Recentemente, tem acontecido recentemente no mundo dos games milhares de demissões. E isso aconteceu com a LucasArts. Né? A LucasArts passou por um período de demissão, ela fechou. E aí eu queria que ele falasse um pouco sobre isso, às vezes a pessoa que trabalha com game, às vezes se sente um pouco acuado e com medo do que está acontecendo no mundo hoje, com essa questão de IA, de menos pessoas trabalhando e tal. Então são duas questões. Primeiro, está acontecendo essas demissões e a LucasArts fechou e houve milhares de demissões por causa disso. E o que um artista hoje pode fazer em relação a isso e o que um artista pode fazer em relação a isso para seguir em frente e poder trabalhar com games.
Será que vão traduzir a resposta do cara?
Vai sim.
Acho que eles vão traduzir também, porque senão ia cortar.
Vai sim. Vai traduzir.
Foi no evento que eu estava lá, o criador do Diablo.
All right, thanks for the question. Yeah,
Eu tava jogando o jogo, cara do Diablo tava atrás.
it is, first of all, I'll say it's really painful to watch all the layoffs happening in the games industry. It's, I mean, my heart has always been there, even though I've spent the last 15, 20 years working on theme park stuff. Like I said, a lot of it has been interactive projects. So I've always kind of kept an eye on what happens in games, and it's disappointing to see, having some conversations earlier with people today, I'm very excited about what's happening in the indie game scene, the fact that there are, off-the-shelf game engines, and you can, with one person even, or a small team, you can put together some amazing games. The hard part about that, of course, is that's the kind of project that you do if you're living in your parents' basement. You're doing it with your own funding. Some people that have families to support. That's not the path that you can take necessarily. So there's that, and then there's the AAA, which is massive, and that's a lot more impacted by the financial problems. And so you see these companies that are constantly doing layoffs. And I think the big disappointment is there's nothing in the middle. There used to be mid-sized companies that would be maybe 50 to 100 people that would regularly put out, not huge blockbuster expensive games, but very good quality games. And people could make a living and have a steady job working at places like that. So I think that's the disappointment. In terms of opportunities, I know I'm talking from what I'm hearing, not from what I've been doing, but people are giving me advice now to try to get, to have more of a public presence. Like, for example, if you want to get an opportunity, go online and post some work that you've done, and maybe someone will see it and like it. And again, it's the modern version of me answering the phone at the right time, to get that job, or talking to that guy in the first place at the art show. How do you do that? You can get a greater reach of people to see your work. So I think there's a version of that. I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, because I'm used to working on my projects and doing some art and going, that's wrong, crumple it up, throw it away. And I don't want anybody to see it in progress. And I know now they say sharing your process is actually good. People enjoy seeing that, and they understand, it's not going to come out right the first time. So I'm trying to teach myself to get comfortable with that process. But I know, like I said, I think there's tools that are going to make the process go faster. There's more opportunities for people to find each other, I think, but getting the funding is still hard. You mentioned AI. I guess this is being filmed, so it's like I'm going to dance on the line there. I will say I struggle with it. As an artist and a creator, there are some really bad, frustrating uses of it that I know are putting people out of work, friends of mine. So that's very disappointing. On the other hand, I actually worked on an R&D project, I don't know if I can publicly say this, for a large entertainment company just a few years back, where we were doing some early experiments with AI. And the initial project we did basically had some AI assistants that allowed you to talk to a character, and then AI would be able to translate that to understand the intent. So essentially, an example I would give, if you've been to Disney World at all or seen, they have the Finding Nemo turtle talk, where you sit in a theater and you can talk to the turtle. There's basically an actor behind the screen with a video game controller and a microphone, and he's doing the voice and he's talking to the kids in the audience. We did an experience that was like that you could do in every room of a hotel. There was like 100 rooms, so you couldn't have an actor back there. So AI allowed us to understand the intent and then translate what the person said to understand which branching recorded dialogue for the character to respond with. So there's a lot of power in that, because they would never have hired 100 actors to be in every hotel room behind the screen. So I think there's some exciting potential with that kind of thing, but I have worked on projects since then where I've been strongly urged to use generative AI, and it's always ended up being a mess. And in fact, very recently I tried doing something with some generative AI, and then I ended up realizing I just wasted a day trying to teach it to do something that I could have finished by now. So, and again, I'm not an expert in the area. I'm using the free versions of a lot of these tools, and I know the paid ones are supposed to be better. But at the end of the day, I kind of go, well, I'm fine with my process doing it by hand. So, it's a challenge. But honestly, if I were to make a prediction now, I think what has happened is AI stuff came out and it's all over the internet, and people got really excited, and they've attempted to put it into the workflow of production environments. And I have friends that are in the animated film industry. They're like, yeah, we're not really using it. And video game, I'm hearing a little of the same thing. So I think people got excited. The pendulum swung really far, in this direction, thinking we'll fire everybody and do it by AI. And then I think reality is creeping back in, and they're understanding it doesn't work as well as you thought it did. Because you guys have seen it. You do something, you give it a prompt, and it's like, that's amazing how quick it did this professional looking thing. But there's a difference between does it look good and does it look right. So it's like, yeah, that's great, but why does he have 4 eyeballs or whatever, And then you try to prompt it to get rid of the extra set of eyeballs or the extra fingers, and it's impossible. So I think it's not gonna change everything overnight the way people have been predicting. Is my prediction? I could be wrong.
Pessoal, só uma pergunta. A palestra toda foi em inglês. Vocês vão querer que eu traduza isso tudo que ele falou?
É complicado.
Ou tá tranquilo? Tá ótimo.
Sorry, that was a lot to translate.
É porque ele fala bastante.
Levanta a mão quem quer, ó, tem um aqui, aí depois vai lá pra cima, depois ele, depois ele, depois ele, beleza?
Bom, eu sou muito fã de Adventures. Nos anos 90 a gente teve a época de ouro, né, com a Sierra, a LucasArts principalmente. Mas com o passar do tempo parece que é um gênero, o Adventure Point and Click foi ficando para trás. As empresas parece que não quiseram investir mais em fazer novos jogos. Então eu queria saber a opinião do Larry, que está na indústria, esteve na indústria, como ele viu esse momento e o momento atual, que parece que as empresas estão voltando a se interessar mais, e é um gênero que ainda sobrevive com muitos jogos indies, né? Hoje está saindo muito jogo indie. E só uma informação lá dentro, eu comecei a jogar The Curse of Monkey Island com a minha filha e ela adora o Worry.
Teve o estresse do gênero, teve o estresse do jogo. E aí meio que morreu.
Fechou lá na Olha essa história hoje. Entrei ali, aí fui pra massa. Aí o cara veio.
Yeah, thank you. So I think the interesting thing is when I left LucasArts, I ended up going to Microsoft, and it was the early Xbox days. That transition, everybody was excited about 3D, and of course, if you've got 3D, then I want to run around and shoot things. that was kind of where the focus went. What's interesting is, at least from the data that I've seen, is the point-and-click adventure game market size didn't change. It didn't go down. It's just that 3D games and everything else exploded. So, at least from what I've been told, the audience was the same size for the point-and-click adventure game, but so many more people wanted to play the 3D games. And then the other challenge, again, was, as you can see just from the games that I talked about, our budgets kept going up more and more. And so to justify that increase in cost, you'd have to grow that audience as well. In fact, one of the last games that I worked on, we had pitched a concept that was a hybrid of puzzle, story, adventure, and some action. But the budget was going to be really huge on it. And our first attempt at the design, the feedback we got was there's not enough action elements to justify the real-time 3D costs that you're going to have to develop it. So I think that's where a lot of the challenge is. The market kind of got distracted by the shiny thing shooting monsters, and the budgets for those were actually lower than anything that we would have done with the story puzzle games as well, because you have mechanics that are repeated, whereas everything in a puzzle game is a special use case. Each scene, each puzzle that you do only gets used once. Whereas running around and shooting, you've got a set of animations that you can just use over and over. But I'm excited about the way you're seeing a lot of indie point-and-click adventures come back. That tells me there's an audience out there of people that like that kind of game, that like working on it, that like playing it, and they miss it. So I think that's exciting. I hope that translates into more commercial productions and more promotion. And again, the new project that we're pitching is kind of in that area. Like it's not an indie budget, it's not a super high budget, but we're trying to convince publishers like, okay, we want to do high enough production values like our previous games, but we've got some ideas to keep it within a reasonable price range. I think there's opportunities for that, and a lot of the publishers that we've talked to have said they're interested. So the problem right now is basically most publishers won't write you a check unless you have a playable demo. That's just the new rule, and a playable demo is very expensive to make. So one of the publishers we spoke with said they'd consider funding development of that demo. So it's like, oh great, we're putting a budget together for that, and maybe that'll happen.